Welcome to the first ever podcast from Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder of SRC Growth, a company that works with management consulting and boutique consulting firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Patrick Dine, the CEO of PSD Global, a company that works with leading IT companies on international strategy, success, and global sustainability in more than 30 countries. He's won multiple awards for excellence, delivered over 200% annual revenue growth for his clients, teaches global business management at local universities, as well as conducting executive management seminars. And on top of all that, he's even served as an international affairs advisor to US presidential campaigns. Today, we're going to be talking about business development as well as international expansion and cross-culture challenges. My guest today is Patrick. Patrick, great to have you on the pod. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you, Saeed, and congratulations on the new podcast.
Thank
Wonderful.
you very much.
Honored to be your first guest. You're not saving the best for last, I guess.
No, best for first. I'm changing it up outright. But absolute pleasure to have you. And it's an honor to be able to start off the podcast so strong with such a great guest, with such a great background. I guess the best way to start, and the best way I feel like would be a great place to start, would be maybe you could give a brief background of your journey to where you are today and the current role you play within your business.
Sure. So thank you, Saeed. So my story is an interesting one. I studied international diplomacy and international relations, always thinking that I would end up doing some sort of global business or global politics role, and then ended up doing the dot-com boom many years ago, working for technology companies, mostly in the US, on how they would go international, how they would take their business global, and really, really enjoyed that and have been doing that and some of the government economic development work ever since. The thing about consulting is that you get to work with so many other clients, other companies, right? You get to experience so much wider of an array of experiences than you would if you were working for one company, then moving to another job and another job. So all your audience members who are consultants, that's the exciting part about consulting, right? And as you rightly said, we've worked with companies in more than 50 countries overall, and it's a lot of exciting experience.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the greatest things about being a consultant, I feel, especially consulting as an industry. You touched on that there. You have a breadth of different types of organizations that you work with, so many different layers that you get to delve into. What made you start PSD Global then? You're a US-based firm, but you've got a global outreach. What was it that first started you off?
Yeah.
I think it was 1999.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. So quite honestly, it was it was doing the dot-com boom, which was happening at that time. There were so many technology companies that I and my colleagues could work for that it seemed natural to think about doing a consulting company versus just working for one of them. And the reason that we are fortunate enough to be so global is just that naturally it ended up being, okay, this company wants to go to that country. We had one client at the beginning who wanted to be all over Africa. And, I didn't have that much experience necessarily with Africa, but we brought people on board who did. And, we expanded. And since then, we've done a lot of work in places like South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco.
Sure, that's what I love as well. When you don't necessarily know or have that experience, you bring in the right kind of experience to be able to service your clients and consult in the right fashion. So, in terms of then success and your success, and obviously you've been around for 25 years, and there's many statistics out there that says that surviving even 5 years in business is just unheard of. Being such a long-standing member of the business community around the world. What does success look like for your business right now, 25 years on?
A very good question. And I love this. Doing a podcast with you is good for my self-confidence. I love this. Very briefly, I think that, you have to accept that consulting, generally speaking, has what they call feast or famine, right? It has cycles, and particularly when you're doing business in certain countries or with the government. So, for example, right now, with the current administration coming in the US, you will see the cycle shift a little bit, where a lot more companies are going to want to do business in the US or have a presence here, sometimes because they feel pressured to do so, than necessarily before. So you see these shifts globally, and you have to be able to adjust to those shifts, right? But the big thing is that you have to early on understand that you're going to have periods of boom and you're going to have periods of quiet, no matter what you do. It's very, very difficult to build a consulting company unless you have government contracts and that's all you're doing. That is always in this sort of boom and growth phase, right? So the way I look at success is, quite frankly, very simple. I look at our clients and I look at how long they stay with us. The average cycle of how long a client would hire you for is maybe 6 to 9 months. And if we are able to turn that to be longer, then we know we've done something right. Most of our clients stay about 3 years. That's the average of our client staying. And nothing is a bigger compliment to us than when a client says, okay, I moved on, or I did this, I hired this person, or I worked with this company afterwards, and they want to come back. That's another way that you can measure the success of your consulting company, is to look at, if you have a key competitor, and generally speaking, in your particular niche, companies go with you or that competitor or those competitors, and you want to look at, if someone worked with you, do they then go to that competitor? And particularly, if they've worked with that competitor before you, do they ever go back, right? That's a big, big red flag. So success to me is not only about profit and revenue and growth, it's also about the sort of reputation that you've built with your clients, because as I'm sure we'll talk about later, one of the best ways to get business is to have existing clients that are happy with your work. And even if you only have 1 or 2 consulting clients, if you do that really, really well and they become a reference for you, you've built a consulting base. As you rightly said earlier, there are a lot of people who basically say, look, I lost my job, or I was laid off, or I'm looking at a move, so I'm going to do consulting. And then they do consulting, but they do it as an independent kind of interim bridge to the next job. And then they go away from consulting and never come back, right? That's not the real consulting space, right? As you know, the real consulting space are people who are building an expertise and work for clients, and they want to do that long term.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, what you just said there. And I think most people, and what you touched on there in terms of some people, when they lose a job and they might be a freelance consultant or an interim consultant, just doing it to fill in the space that they have between jobs. I think the really successful consulting companies, the businesses out there that actually are striving for excellence, they're trying to become the best at what they do, at least building that expertise, right? And there's many people out there that are running consulting firms, some better than others, and that's what the success is. But approaching consulting in the right way, in the way where you're going, I'm going to provide as much value as possible to my clients, I think that's the best way to approach it. And just following on from that, obviously a US-based company, you're now global. You've got offices from around the world, I think US, Europe, and other parts of the world. How do you navigate the international markets when servicing clients? Of course, there's so many different things to consider. What is it that you do that makes you so special?
Good question. Excellent question. I think that the biggest thing is that you have to understand that every country and every culture is different, right? So if you're living in London, you don't have to go very far. You can take a train just a little bit and be in completely different cultures in Belgium or France, for example. And, in the US, you have less of that because the country is so large, but we have within the country lots of cultural differences, right? And when you're doing business internationally, the first thing is to keep that in mind, that a client in Bulgaria has very different views or backgrounds of how they look at sales or success than someone from Germany or, Mexico, for example, right? So that's the first step. The other step is that in the end, it's all about giving the client, because a lot of what we do is to bring clients together from 2 different countries or multiple countries. And the biggest thing is to explain to them that selling to an American is very different than selling to a German or a Brit, right? And if you understand that, you can do really, really well in global business. And I always tell consulting companies, you don't have to go very far to be global, right? You can be global in London. You can work for global companies without ever leaving central London. And, that's the kind of experience that then you can broaden and work out from there. And you want to play to your strengths, but be open-minded. And, and we've had clients from many, many different cultures, and you have to adjust to that cultural difference, right? But in the end, it all comes down to what you said. You want to focus on their success. I have a lot of competitors that focus a lot on churning out new clients and keeping their pipeline full. And then you have so many clients. That's the other risk, right? You have so many clients. Let's say there's 5 of you and you have 10 clients. Very quickly, you're going to get to the point where you think about, maybe we cannot really handle more clients right now. And then the big risk comes, and this ties into your question, who do you hire, whom do you bring on board, who can then help you grow that company, right? And you want to maintain that quality while you're increasing your quantity of people. You cannot, for example, just say, oh, we're going to do business in Morocco now. Let's hire someone locally in Morocco who's really good, because they also need to have that expertise that you have, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, a really great point there in the sense that scaling your offer to around the globe doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to scale in the right way when you're recruiting the talent for your business. And sometimes that could be what sometimes can hold you back from touching on different markets. But if you find the right talent, then it can really explode your business as well. And you touched on a couple of points there in terms of your competitors. How has the competitive landscape evolved over time since
Yeah,
you...
it's a good question. So on the government side, where we work for governments, it has been a trend, which is very important for consultants to keep this in mind. It has been a trend towards the lowest cost, right? So
Mhm.
younger people are coming in and saying, hey, I can do this too. And they try to offer the same kind of consulting services with less experience. And they basically try to win the project, particularly when you have RFPs and tenders. They try to win those projects on price. And quite frankly, it seems obvious, but maybe it's not to some people, is when you take a value that should cost $1,000 or £1,000, and then you offer that for $500, you are somehow cutting out something, right? And you're going to cut out the quality. So that's the first thing. On the corporate side, it's the same thing, right? Everybody is a consultant these days. Everybody's an AI expert, or everybody, and their mother has a software company or a venture fund without money, right? So you have to be very careful. But what has never really changed are the fundamentals of what makes a successful business consultant. It's having an expertise, giving that expertise to companies or governments, and then charging a fair price for it, and then making sure they get value, right? As long as the $1,000 they're paying gives them at least more than $1,000 in value, why wouldn't they want to hire you, right? Why wouldn't they want to work with a consulting company? And what has shifted is when I started doing this, which, as you multiple times mentioned, was a long time ago, it was a lot less competitive than it is now. But again, if you have quality in the end always wins. And as I said earlier, the biggest thing when you're doing a consulting company, it all comes down to make your clients happy, but not at the expense of, I work 90 hours a week to make my client happy. I'm making no money just to make this client happy, but in a reasonable approach, which is still good for you and for your business. Then you'll never starve.
Yeah, and I think that you've raised some really interesting points there, and I couldn't agree more in the sense that the competitive landscape right now. It's becoming more competitive than ever. A younger person with a laptop is able to start consulting businesses and able to try and approach these RFPs or RFQs to be able to trying to bring in that type of business for a lower cost. But as you mentioned there, price is the fastest way to determine the quality, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
from the outset, if you look at something that is naturally going to be cheaper, the hours that are required to do a piece of work does not change. If anything, if it's a longer or a more sophisticated piece of work, it might take even longer. That doesn't mean that just because you've cut the price, doesn't mean the workload has changed.
Yep. I agree.
But the reflection of value is slightly different then, and then that can have a snowballing effect, often negative on companies, and it's a race to the bottom.
And what happens then, Saeed, is that they get sour taste in their mouth
Yeah,
of consultants, and they say,
yeah,
I'm never hiring a consultant again. Right?
exactly.
In the
Yeah,
government side, there's sort of this cycle. First, they say, we want to have our own people, and then they get tired of having their own people. They want to save money. They hire consultants. Then they get tired of having the consultants, and they bring back their own people. On the business side, one of the biggest things is the question of, do I hire my own people or do I hire consultants? Do we really need consultants for this, right? And I've been to many meetings in many different countries where they say, oh, here's Patrick, he's our consultant. And then you should see the look on the face of the people sitting in the room. Their only thought is he here to cut my job? Is he going to get rid of me? Is he analyzing my productivity? And then the first thing I always say is, I'm not here to analyze you. And then they become your friend, right? You need to make
yeah.
the internal employees your friend.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. It's that initial fear that comes in. Oh,
The consultants are here.
what do I need to be doing to impress this person or whatever it might be? 100%.
There's a movie, I don't remember the name of the movie, but there's a movie where they hire consultants to fire the other consultants.
I've seen it. Yeah, yeah. I think the film might be Office Space. It's a
Yeah, it's an office space. Yeah,
great,
yeah.
great film. Great
Now
film.
you've aged yourself. You've dated yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Very quickly like that. Love it, love it. So, of course, again, PSD being a global brand, global business, I'm sure there's lots of cross-cultural differences that come into play, as you mentioned but earlier with Bulgaria as an example. How are you able to deliver your service with those cross-cultural differences? For example, you mentioned earlier about how a US consumer would be different in responding to something than a Bulgarian consumer, and we say this to our clients as well. Messaging is so key, and what you say to the West is very different to what you say to the East, and for that reason, it becomes challenges that you need to navigate. So, what are some of those challenges you were able to overcome when it comes to cross-cultural
Yeah.
differences?
So the first, I always think of this very old TV show, which now has a show on the West End in London called Faulty Towers, which
Yep,
if
love it.
you really need to watch, which is all about, don't mention the war when the Germans are coming. But basically, cross-cultural is it's important to understand that because of cross-cultural differences, doing business with a group from Thailand is very different than doing business with a group even from Japan. But the big thing about cultural differences is to ask yourself at the beginning how people are perceiving the core elements. What I mean by that is people from the East have a different perspective, or even from the South here, so from Latin America, have a different perception of time. So if you have a meeting, you go into the meeting, they might be, in your perception, late for the meeting, but in their mind, they're not, right? Because they look at time as a more fluid way, right? That doesn't make the meeting bad, but you need to set that expectation, right? How they define success is also different than how you define success. I always tell my clients that America, for example, the US, is a country which people think of as very transactional. I'm going to do business with you. Let's make the money. Time is money. Let's do it. But it really is all about relationships. Americans are more than happy to build a relationship with you if they like you and they think that there could be business together in the future. You go to Germany, for example, they are much more likely to say, well, there's nothing in the data now that shows we should work together. We wish you luck. We'll come back to you if we ever need you. But they're not looking at building a long-term relationship, which I think is actually, in my opinion, one of the weaknesses of business in that country. In Italy, for example, it's more relationship-driven again, right? So you have to look at all these factors. The biggest thing is just to be very open-minded and flexible, but also help set the expectations. A lot of my Middle Eastern clients don't like to have the camera on when they're in a client briefing, which the Americans, for example, or the Canadians or German, really, really don't like. They take offense to that. But if you set the expectation at the beginning that they're probably not going to have their camera on, they might be 20 minutes late, but that doesn't make this a bad meeting, right? So my favorite, I used to always take my European clients to meetings with Americans or Canadians, and they would leave the meeting saying, well, where is the follow-up? The Koreans are the same way. Where's the data? Where's the info? While the Americans or Canadians said, oh, that was a great meeting. Because to the North Americans, that was building the relationship, right? The ice was broken, the relationship was formed. And to the Europeans, it was all about what will come out of it in terms of real substance, right? So you have to kind of try to bridge that. It's not always easy, but it's very important to build. And as a consultant, you want to make sure that you also set from the beginning the expectations of what the client is really expecting, what they're going to pay for, when they're going to pay, and then make sure that you kind of enforce those payment terms, right? I've had all sorts of payment terms and all sorts of delays and timings, and some clients will pay perfectly, and also in some cultures, decisions are made in a group, and there's harmony in the group, and that's really important to them. While in other cultures, it's much more authoritarian and much more structured and focused on the individual. So, where the big boss is sitting there and he or she makes the decision, while in a group from Thailand, for example, 4 people are there. One of them is clearly the boss, but in the end, they're going to make a harmonious decision. And you don't know who's really the key influencer in that Thai group who will make that final decision. And they also don't like to give, for example, we've had clients from Thailand who don't necessarily want to give you negative feedback. So if they decide to hire a different consultant next time, don't expect that they're necessarily going to tell you why, which as a consultant, you always want that That's another recommendation I have. Always gently ask for feedback when you lose an RFP or RFQ or you're not chosen, because it's really helpful to get that info from the client and then learn from that and improve, because you can always improve.
Absolutely. There's so many things you mentioned there, and I think uh, one of my favorite things there was what you mentioned about the long-term relationships and fostering a long-term relationship and the difference in attitudes towards that. I think the US and the UK to a certain extent understand that, more so in the US 100%, understand that the relationship, there's a compounding effect to it, right? And it might not be now that the benefit comes, but down the line it can be a great opportunity. And the data driven approach that is involved when it comes to other areas of the country, it actually reminds me of what you mentioned there about China. It reminds me of, I read a book recently called Shoe Dog, a fantastic book about Phil Knight and Nike as a company and his journey to growing that company. And he went to Japan, and in Japan he was negotiating how to get deals over these shoes over to the US and things like that. And often it was very clear that number one, the boss that comes in, everyone is the clear. You cannot question that person. But whereas in other countries, I guess there's more of a collaborative approach. So I think some really interesting points you mentioned there about that international aspect of consulting and things like that. In terms of then, I guess, in terms of business development as a whole, of course, having so many clients in so many different areas of the world, what specific business development strategies are working for you and your clients the best at the moment?
Very good question. And I think we'll make a quick plug for you there. If they hire you and SRC Growth Partners, they'll be able to have you help them. The biggest question that you have to ask yourself, first of all, as a consulting company, right, is there's a book by Michael Gerber all about how you grow a small business, which has one sentence as a summary of the whole book, which is all about you want to work on the business, not in the business, right? So if you are a baker, you can be an amazing baker, but if you want to grow a bakery, you need to manage the bakery and have other people do the baking, right? And that's really important, that at some point you get to the moment where you say, look, I'm really, really good at this consulting and I want to focus on servicing the clients, but I'm not a great salesperson, or I'm very, very good at sales, but I'm not so great at this particular piece, so I want to bring on people. So that's why hiring others to do your sales and business development which is why we are marketed to companies, is really helpful, because you can focus on your core expertise and others are helping you do the functional part of selling. What always, always works best is to build a reputation for excellence, and then to have people who recommend you and build relationships with people so that they can be your reference and they can be your client. And I just had a call the other day with my former client from Europe, who came back to me and said, look, we're very, very unhappy with the company we're working with now. We had not been able to rebid because we're working for a competitive area. And, he said, I would love to come back to you. And sometimes, you have to make concessions in order to do that. The biggest thing about business development, obviously, it's whom you reach out to, how many people you reach out to, right? There are all these basic sales techniques that are there. But if you show people expertise and value for what you do, and that it's, it's not way too expensive, but it's a really valuable service, then, they will come back to you. And again, I come back to my point about building long-term relationships. People who might not want to work with me now, they could switch companies or things could change tomorrow. And, you want to have that relationship. What works really well right now, because people are inundated with emails, inundated with LinkedIn requests, don't send a 3-page LinkedIn request with all this info, is to send them information, right? To for example, if I see that Saeed is looking at vacationing in Botswana, and I happen to know the head of the tourism industry in Botswana, if I can bring that intro to you, there's nothing in it for me except you remember that I'm the one who introduced you to the commissioner in Botswana. And then later on, I may end up doing business with both of you, right? So consulting is all about being in the right place at the right time, and people like you and respect your expertise. But I do recommend that if you're a small and growing consulting company who's really good at your core expertise and you're doing that, hire really good salespeople or outsource to a really good company to do the sales and the growth, because that's a function that maybe is not your core, and it'll take you away from what you should be doing, which is organizing the business, building it for growth, having the right CRM system, and all of those things.
No, I love everything you said there, and I resonate with everything you mentioned there wholeheartedly. That's the purpose of how we operate. Often, many consulting firms that we work with and we speak with, often sales and marketing is not their idea, or business development at all isn't on their parameters. They're just trying to do what they love to do and get more work by finding excellence in what they
Yep.
do.
Yep.
And so, being able to outsource or partner with someone that is able to alleviate that burden, because business development is not an easy thing to do. Like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Everyone's business would be $100 million businesses. Everyone would be living in, I don't know, utopia, right? If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And I think the great point you mentioned there was essentially leading with value. If you lead with value first and with no expectations, then something can happen on the other end, which can really help. But
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I would also add to that, if I may, that it's really, really important to hire consultants or partners, whether that's your partner in another country or your outsourced business development team, looking for the same things that you would want your clients to look for, right? Are they presenting well? Do you like them? Do they show value and expertise, right? So because they're going to be your representative, right? So you're going to get called. Everybody's getting these LinkedIn requests from all sorts of countries for virtual assistants or people who can do your lead generation on LinkedIn for, X amount of dollars. And then they connect you, you're selling consulting globally to factories and they're
yeah,
connecting you with all your local dentists, right?
yeah,
That's not LinkedIn connection. I mean, it's great if you need a dentist, but it's not necessarily what you're looking for in terms of value for your business. And every person who represents you can hurt your business as much as they can help your business.
yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And what you mentioned there with LinkedIn and email, like, I get 10 to 15 new messages or in my inbox or emails coming in of so many different services. Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? You're not cutting through the noise anymore. So the market is so sophisticated. There's so many players out there at the moment. You're never going to be able to cut through the noise unless you actually provide value first. So I think that's some great points there. So in terms of then, what are your most successful clients doing to achieve growth? What is it that they're doing, and what is it that you're doing for them to help them achieve that
Sure.
growth?
Yeah. I think it comes back a lot to what I said earlier about how you grow your consulting company, right? The really best software companies, for example, are number one, providing a product or a service that is really, really good, right? So I can sell software development or a software company, but then when they don't deliver real value, a really great product, they're going to not win any follow-on business with that client, and that's not going to be because if you think about it, many smaller software companies may want to sell to very large enterprise customers, right? So once they're in, like a Nike or an Adidas or something like that, if they're in one of those companies and then they don't provide real value, something really great, they're never going to get another enterprise customer, right? So that's number one. Number two, for particularly technology companies, is to always be innovating, right? Don't just follow the buzzwords of AI or whatever it is, right? You need to always be looking at what is it that you can do that is more innovative than your competitor, right? Because there are some products that you'll buy based only on price, right? So if I'm buying an app that, sets an alarm, I don't really care because they all set an alarm. Which one is free? Which one costs $5? What's the value, right? But if you're buying a CRM system to manage your whole business, then you really want that CRM system to be pretty darn good, and you're willing to pay a little bit for that, right? So my most successful clients are innovating. They're focusing very much on their customer base and providing real value, but they're also these days really focused on their employees, right? Making the employees happy and keeping the employees, because you're only as good as the people that you have, and technology people in particular can go anywhere, right? They can move very, very quickly to another company. And, just like for you and for me, those companies have to show also their expertise by saying, we've done these kind of projects successfully. Maybe I only have 5, maybe I have 50. As long as they were really successful, those can be credibility.
Yeah, no, Couldn't agree with you more. And it's a great point there with regards to your team. And what I always say to my clients and everyone I speak to actually is that if you look after your team will look after your clients. And that's the key there. And having a good working relationship, but also fostering a good culture within the organization creates a lot of opportunities on the end of actually providing a quality service to clients themselves. In terms of then PSD Global, as a business itself, how are you currently attracting new business in terms of implementing business development techniques, tactics? Might just be the references that you have and having such great relationships and business relationships. How are you currently doing that?
So on the one hand, once you've been in business for a little while, you get a lot of clients by referrals, by maintaining your existing clients, by them knowing about you, or by Jane Smith or Bob Jones, who was your client 5 years ago and now works for a different company, and they come back to you. That's obviously one way that you really get. Then you also have to, I think, provide expertise, right? Things like this wonderful podcast where we're talking and people can see who we are, what we're all about, what expertise you and I seem to have, and then they can make their own judgment, right? So it's a lot of that. But I do think that you always have to be looking for new clients in innovative ways, from, speaking at conferences to putting things on LinkedIn to connecting with people, right? Helping them out. But I always come back, and it may sound so simple, but it really works. Look for, when you're talking to people, you're having a 20-minute intro call. How can I help you? Even if there's nothing in it for me. I had a call the other day with someone whose son was doing a project in real estate in the Bahamas. And I happened to know on that island a fantastic lawyer that should really be connected with his son. And, the lawyer is really happy. His son is really happy. And, one day there may be something in it for us in terms of working together, right? What I think is really important when you're selling consulting services that are in a niche, you obviously want to show your expertise. But if you're in a more broad, hey, I can do something for you that 20 other companies say they can do, then you really have to find innovative ways of connecting with people, right? So meeting them at conferences, and going to where they are, and where they like to meet. And that's another point about culture. Everyone likes to be sold to in a different way. If I want to buy a car, right, you may like looking online, you hit the little button, you've made your mind up, you just want to negotiate the price, you want the car to be delivered this afternoon to your house and your flat, and that's it. Someone else may want to go to the dealership and drive the car and talk to them and negotiate there, and they don't want to look at any of their online stuff, they don't want to have any phone calls. They just want to make the deal today in person. While others, hey, 10 dealers, call me, email me, let me know what you think, right? And everybody likes to be reached in a different way. Some people respond really well to LinkedIn, some people to email, some people to phone calls. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes 20 phone calls, right, to follow up on one email you sent and saying, hey, you didn't answer in the last 2 hours. But everybody likes to be reached a different way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when, for example, one of my colleagues or my assistant reaches out, someone responds, and when I reach out personally, they don't respond because there's more credibility to someone else reaching out on my behalf. You have to find these innovative ways of doing business development.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more with you. And I love the analogy there with different people like to be sold in different ways. And it makes me think of when I go into a restaurant, I'm the type of person who asks, what's your best? Recommend me. This is giving me decision fatigue. Whereas someone else might be like, no, I want to look at the menu and actually decide what I have. Some people might look at the menu ahead of time so they don't have to waste time getting there. So many different ways that people operate, and finding the right way. And we call it tailoring your messaging. When you're going out to market, being able to tailor your messaging for the right kind of prospect. For example, like for consulting firms, you wouldn't speak about sales and marketing. You would be speaking about business development. But if you go to cybersecurity, you'll be talking about sales and marketing, right? So it's all about the language that's used. So it's always interesting to hear that.
Really, really important is when you're getting whatever response or lack of response, don't take it personal. It's not personal, right? They don't know you, so how can it be personal? And even if they know you, right, they may have pressures from their boss to go with a different vendor. I mean, there are lots and lots of reasons why people hire you or why they don't hire you. And it's not personal. And if you don't take it personal, then a year from now or 2 years from now, they may become your client. And I try, when people sell to me, I try to be very, very open, right? Look, this is not something that I need now, and here's why. And, if they don't take that, that's their choice. But if you don't have the need, then you don't want to hire that particular business. But you have to also help show the need. Again, as you said, there are different ways of selling, but don't take it personally.
Yeah, and I love that, and I say that to everyone in my organization. Business is not personal; it's just business, right? And that's what it is. There needs to be a need there for you to be able to move forward. In terms of then sales as a whole, so business development as a whole, but specifically that sales side of things. How is your team structured for growth? Do you have a sales team? Do you advise on your clients to have a sales team? I think you touched on it earlier, saying
Yeah.
not so much, but yeah.
So we do have a small sales team, but we
Mhm.
just like that you would like to hear, we outsource a lot of what we do, and we're very fortunate that, again, because we've been doing it so long and it's such a niche, we don't have to. Sometimes you get to what I said earlier, to the level where there is enough business in the pipeline and enough backlog that you don't need to aggressively pursue growth. But we are built for growth by, again, always thinking of what can we do next. Like right now, we started offering global sustainability services, helping companies look at their sustainability piece in their supply chain and in their presence. And, it's something we didn't do before. And that, we're always growing what we can offer and how we offer it, right? But I recommend to most of my clients what I said earlier, right? If you have a core expertise and it's not sales, outsource sales, right? And the thing about outsource sales or business development is that there is a lot less risk than hiring people. In the old days, the way you would enter a market is you say, we need to go to Europe, so let's hire a guy or a lady in London. And then it turns out that they hired someone who lives actually in Liverpool or somewhere really far from central London and has no real expertise in that particular sector, but they are British, right? And nothing against, and my dad was British, so nothing against the British. But, then that doesn't mean that they can sell really well in Italy, Germany, or France, particularly if they don't speak the languages, right? And, you have to look at outsourcing. You have a lot less risk. If it doesn't work in 9 months, you can end the relationship with that particular. And, we try to tell our clients, we don't guarantee results when we do business development because nobody can. Nobody can say, I can definitely get you X revenue.
Mhm.
But we show you how we do it, how many companies we're reaching out to, which wish list companies or which companies you want us to reach out to. And after 6 months or 9 months, you'll have a deliverable. You have something that you received, a report, an analysis, all of this outreach, all these calls, things that you can show as actual deliverables that you received, right? Not just, oh, I paid you for 6 months and I got nothing. But, and we show you the process so you can learn from the process. And I think that's much, much better than hiring your own people. To hire a growth firm like yours is a really, really good idea because it allows the company to focus on what they're good at, and you focus on what you're good at. And again, if it doesn't work, it's a lot less risk than hiring 2 or 3 salespeople.
No, exactly that. And I actually had an interview recently with a client, and he specifically said to me, why do people go for consultants? Well, consultants are actually often a cheaper solution to hiring in-house teams, right? And it can be a way to speed up any gaps that there are in terms of what you're looking for. And there might be the eventual goal of going in-house, but bringing in a consultant reduces the ignorance debt that might be when you're trying to close that gap. So then when you do bring in the right type of people, eventually, if you do decide to go in-house, you're able to go, okay, well, we know all this now because we've had someone tell us, okay, so we're not missing out on all these other things. Whereas if you go in and hire six-figure hire or business development director or something like that, and they come in, they don't hit the ground running and it's expensive and things aren't changing, often it can be a painful time for an organization to move forward. So yeah, no, 100% agree with a lot of the things you've mentioned there. In terms of then, you touch on the specific metrics you look at for your business earlier, and one being how long clients stick with you. As a leader of your organization, what are the most important metrics that you look at when it comes to your business?
That's a good, very, very good question. We could spend an hour on that, but
Yeah,
very
tell me about
briefly, I think again, it's for us because we're doing global consulting. It's which countries are we doing enough in Europe? Are we doing enough in Latin America? Right? It's geographic spread of the clients. It's certainly obviously the revenue that you've produced, how profitable that business was, but also how long do the consultants stay? How long do the clients stay? The loyalty metric is really, really important in consulting. It's also which percentage, let's say you offer 4 different things, which percentage of your business is each of these 4 categories bringing in, right? So if I offer sustainability, sales, and marketing is bringing in 90% of the revenue, that is a very important metric to look at, right? I do look at what percentage of deals that we win, right? You look at the sort of loss rate or win rate, because if you're losing 80% of your business to your competitors, but you're winning 3 and they produce so much revenue, maybe that's actually not all that bad, but you want to look at that. Those are very important. And, we look at, but I would say, as I said earlier, the most important metric for my kind of consulting business is customer loyalty and what percentage of my customers would recommend me.
Mhm.
Because it's sort of, I always say about this, and I like my competitors, they're good people. And, sometimes it's sort of like going to a doctor, right? If you have a specific problem, you want to go to an amazing doctor who can deal with that problem. And if he or she is going on holiday next week, you want him or her to be able to recommend another doctor who's also really good. And as long as my clients would recommend me to their family members, I know that that's the most important metric, and all the other metrics take care of themselves.
Absolutely. I love that, because what I tell all my clients is consulting is a trust and relationships business, right?
It's
You have to
absolutely.
build the trust and you have to build the relationships. And if you are able to build those aspects of things, business will come, because you're building that trust. Because once you've built the trust with one person, and they will speak and be your raving fan, they will tell someone else, and when they eventually come to you, there's half the battle is already won, because they're coming to you having almost their mind made up. Someone I trust has told me about you. They must.
And you never know who is going to be that person
Yes.
who recommend. I have had some gigantic clients that came out of someone where you never would have expected that he or she would be the one who brings it. That's why my dad taught me, be nice to everyone, and then you
Yeah.
don't have to wonder who you should be nice to.
Yeah. Oh,
Whom
I
you
love
should be
that one.
nice to.
I love that one. Be nice to everyone, so you don't have to wonder who you should be nice to. I'm going to take that one, if you don't mind, Pat.
Feel free. Feel free.
Passed down through the dying generations, right?
Hopefully.
So I've got a few more questions, and then
Always.
we'll be. But in terms of PSD Global, where do you see the business going in the next 3 to 5 years? Could upward trajectory growth, or is it something eventual exit that you want to go down, or how do you see your future going?
Yeah, I think that, as I said earlier, for our company, the growth path, the future, hopefully will include doing new things, right? So as part of what we do gets not replaced by AI, but becomes easier, and there's less value in X, you want to do more of Y, right? So we want to move more towards helping companies with sustainability, which I think will make a difference in when you get to be a little bit older, Saeed, and I'm hopefully not that old yet, but getting that is, you ask yourself also, what difference is the kind of work that I'm doing really making, right? So I'm very fortunate that a lot of the work that I do, particularly with the governments, creates jobs, right? It helps companies go to different countries and create jobs in that country. And, that's a real impact that you can make. So I would hope that my consulting company would continue to grow to provide things that are important to the world, such as sustainability. And, I would like us to do more in different countries that we have. It's not that there's a checklist or bucket list of, hey, we need to do business in Nigeria, but it's, there are things that I would like to see us do that we haven't done before. And, when you have your consulting company, coming back to what I mentioned earlier about that book where you're supposed to work on your business, not in your business, it's also really important to always ask yourself, why? Why do I have this consulting company, right? Are you just doing it because which is not a bad reason, you want to provide stability for your family, you want to have a lifestyle business, right? Which is, you don't want to work too hard, whatever it is, ask yourself what that is. In the US in particular, but also in the UK, very often people are looking at you ask themselves about the end first, right? What do I want to have when I'm finished? I would like to make sure that my company has done things that are so meaningful that those things will last. And the things that I'm most proud of are the interns and the young consultants that we've mentored, who have then gone on to great careers, right? Because the expertise, whatever little expertise I may have, and the knowledge that we share with them, that we've trained them, if they then go off and do good things using that expertise, then you've done well.
Now, there's a level of fulfillment that comes with it, isn't it? Where you're able to build and develop others and also be able to change. You're only working in a very small market share of whatever you're looking for. So being able to have an impact in that whatever you're doing, it provides a level of purpose and fulfillment that I think it's a really great way to move forward, I think. So what would be standing in your way currently of you achieving those goals that you have, those ambitions, those things?
Good question. Well, hopefully nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you always have to figure out how you can grow more, right? What can you do better? Always looking at improving. And I think in a global business, in a global consulting business as well, but also if you're representing another company, is the geopolitical and global trends, right? So, what 6 months ago may have seemed like a great country to do business in now has shifted, right? So you have to be able to adjust to those trends, right? So even if I really, really want to now help more companies do sustainability in the US, the next administration is probably going to focus a little bit less on environmental policies and funding, which doesn't mean that sustainability is less important or companies will do less in ESG and so on, in environmental and social goals and those kind of governments. But you have to be willing to adjust. So hopefully the only thing that stands in our way is time and, making sure we get it done. I always have a very optimistic outlook and looking at the future, but it's, the only thing that stands in your way is how fast you're growing, how well you're producing, and who's helping you grow.
And I feel like most founders that I speak with always have an optimistic, even if they're going through the hardest times, next month's the best one, or
Sure.
the
Yep.
future's always bright. And that's
Yep.
the right,
Yep.
you can't
That's
run a
right.
business without having that kind of attitude,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And I agree. And the big thing about founders is, right, they bring that energy, those ideas, all of that. But then at some point they will need help to actually grow the company, right? Because
Absolutely.
founder and grower are usually different.
Yeah, exactly. The role of a founder is very different to the role of a CEO, right? And that's at the smaller level, medium level, or higher level. Every single time it's different, and it reminds me of I think it's Ben Francis, the now CEO of Gymshark, right? But there's so many interviews where he talks about when he was a founder and he had to he had to give up the role of CEO of the business to actually learn about the business as a massive corporate. And then he, over years learning and then changing and developing, then he was like, okay, I can be a CEO now. So it's a different role all in all. So I think you've touched on a great point there. So I like to end, and I know this is episode 1, but this is a question I'd love to end for all the future podcasts.
Okay. Wow. No pressure here.
Yeah, it's hopefully it's a fairly easy one. But if you had a magic wand to solve one business problem, what would that business problem be?
Excellent thing. I will end on a philosophical note as
Yeah,
well. I
amazing.
think that if I could change one thing about global business, it's that 90% or whatever the percentage is of businesses don't solve real problems. They don't actually do something really meaningful, right? And the problem can be as simple as there isn't a good fish and chips shop in my neighborhood, right? We need to have one because people love to eat fish and chips here. Or it can be as large as companies are producing too much waste when they're manufacturing, and I have a technology that can help reduce that by 70%, right? It can be as large or as small, but if I had a magic wand, my wish, or my 3 wishes all together, would be that businesses do solve problems that are really impactful. And when you start your business, ask yourself, what problem or problems am I really trying to solve other than making money? And if you do that, you will be successful.
Absolutely. That was a great way to end it, Patrick.
Awesome. Now,
Fantastic.
all the future podcast
Yeah,
participants
I
can
think,
copy our answers.
yeah, exactly. That's it. That's it. If they want to replicate the perfect podcast, I would say
I love
have
it.
a look at the
I love
episode
it.
1, right? Patrick
I love it.
Dine,
Episode 1, number 1.
number 1, exactly.
I love it, Saeed. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no, absolutely, absolute pleasure speaking with you. A
It's an
really
honor.
insightful conversation, and clearly someone that's done many things in their life and has many things left to do. So good luck with the future. Good luck with
Same to you, Saeed.
the new offer, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Saeed. I learned a lot. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. It was a
and
lot of
so
fun.
did I. Appreciate it. All right then.